Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Speak. I'm Talia Pardo, freelance editor, intuitive mentor, life coach, and it's my pleasure to welcome today Candace Patrick to the show. This is a show where I like to talk to healers and leaders and people who are interested in exploring themselves and personal growth. And I think Candace Patrick is a wonderful example of that. She has worked with and works with Reiki and past life readings and is currently focusing in on shadow work and womb healing. She describes herself as a traveler of the universe and a seeker of the unknown, which I love. And that your gifts lie in seeing the truth in others and learning to lovingly call them forward to their greatest potential, which I think is a very apt description of the guide work that we do as healers and coaches, in that you can't usually do the work for somebody else, but you can help them see who they are and help lift them up to their greatest potential. So that's a perfect description of that. And so you're, as a traveler in your car, and as you're traveling, which is also very, apropos for our conversation today. So I'm going to hand it off to you to tell the audience a little bit about how you got to, living this life of traveling and communing and connecting with the universe and energies, and sharing that with your clients and with people that you work with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here in my car in the Walmart parking lot so I can get Wi-Fi. It's one of the pleasures of traveling all over the place and continuing to take my business with me. I have to get a little creative sometimes. So don't mind the people around me.
It's a real testament to the adaptability we need in life, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
as we want things to be a certain way, and then we have to release it and, be in the moment with what it is. So
Yeah, exactly. Last night I was on a call, and normally McDonald's parking lots have the best Wi-Fi, and for some reason theirs was down, so I had to look around for the next free Wi-Fi spot. It's
wow.
like the interesting, I don't know, it's interesting, always on your toes when you're traveling. But I've only been doing the traveling thing since 2019. So before that, I was in the corporate world. So I'm a corporate escapee. I had
Congrats.
done sales. Yeah, right. I had done sales my whole life, and I was good at it because I'm an empath. So I could tell what somebody needed as I was speaking to them. That was before I knew what empaths really were. And I worked in a recruiting firm, which was interesting. So I was really connecting with people, and I would hire people based on my gut. And my boss was like, "You can't do that." I'm like, "They're going to be amazing. What are you talking about?" And they would be amazing. And then I'd hire someone that looked good on paper to, in her world. And, they would end up stealing from us and doing all these crazy things. I'm like, my gut told me not to hire him, but you didn't. But it's harder to explain in the corporate world. So anyway, the world was filled with just ego and all these things that felt really out of alignment with me. And every day I was going into work, I was getting sicker and sicker, and my soul felt like it was dying every day. So I ended up going in and out of the hospital, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I'd gotten up to 200 pounds. I was just sick, and I couldn't, every day I was miserable. But I was also binge eating every night, crazy binge eating. I didn't have friends because I would rather sit at home and eat and numb myself with
Drown
comfort.
in it. Yeah.
Yep. And I had alcohol and weed and Netflix, and you name the escape mechanism, I had it. And doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, so I went to the holistic side because I remembered years ago someone mentioned Reiki, and I had a mini session, and it did wonders for me then in 15 minutes. So I was in a whole new city, so I checked out a new practitioner that seemed online. She kind of vibed with me, and when I was doing my Reiki session with her, she mentioned all of these things that were coming up and how I was having past life things that were a lot of the energy that I was feeling, a lot of the symptoms I was having was, one, because I was an empath and I was taking on my toxic partner's physical symptoms. And also there were the reason I couldn't get out of that toxic relationship was related to past lives. I didn't know anything about past lives, so
Right.
that really sparked my interest. And most of my symptoms had disappeared like right then during that session. I was like, okay, there's something more
That's
here.
huge. Yeah,
Right.
that's incredible.
So I started diving into that a little bit more, and I was like, well, I want to do a past life reading. So I had done one with her, and then it was amazing, and I uncovered a lot of things that it answered a lot of questions that I had about myself that I didn't realize I had, but I wondered all these years.
Mhm.
So then I did a reading with my partner at the time. I was like, hey, she said, we've got these past lives. Like, you want to check them out? Because it sounds like that could be, neither one of us want to be in this relationship, but we can't seem to
Mhm.
let go. So let's see if this is related to it. So we did, and we read the results together. We cried, and then within a week, we were totally separated.
Wow.
So after like a year and a half of just like trying to, it was a 4 year
That's
craziness. But that last year and a half, we were both like, we needed out. So anyway, so that ended that. And I was like, okay, well, now I've got a whole new passion is these past lives. What can I learn more? How can I do this for myself? How can I help other people? And so I learned how to do it myself. And then I started offering that to clients. And I was doing Reiki as well, and archangelic light, and dream interpretation, and all of these things while I was working at the corporate job. And decided one day, like, my soul was like, you can't do this job anymore. So I gave like a 7 week notice and got out of there and started my own thing. All I knew was my business name. I'm like, I guess I'm doing this. And that was January 2019.
wow.
Um,
What timing
and
too? Right before,
right.
yeah, right before everything locked. Oh no, 2019. That was the year before. Yeah, but still, it's
Right.
not a long headway before everything changes in the world too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's the really interesting part of it. I'm a huge believer in everything happens for a reason. And I've always been a traveler ever since I was like little. When I was in high school, I was a student ambassador. I went to Australia and the United Kingdom. I've always been a traveler. But then when I grew up and then I got into the corporate world, there wasn't time for it or money for it. So I had to, do what I was supposed to do.
Mm.
And when I started my own thing, I was stuck in fear because I, had saved up enough money to run my business for the first year, knowing I probably wouldn't make anything. Um, but I was afraid to buy business cards or invest in myself. So I realized that the only way to work through fears is to face them, which is a funny how that's kind of really what started this whole journey for me. And now that's what I teach people with my shadow work classes. So I was like, all right, well, I'm afraid to spend money, so maybe I need to spend money to make this fear go away, know that it's okay. So I found this crazy lake. I was scrolling through Instagram one night and I found this awesome lake, and it was in Canada. And I'm like, I'm going to go because I don't have a husband, I don't have kids. I just left my corporate job. I can take my business anywhere. I have a dog that likes to travel in a car and a tent. Never used my tent before, but I can figure it out, right? So I went to Canada, and I thought I was going to be gone for a little bit. My parents thought I'd be back in a week. But I was gone 61 days. I came back 15,000 miles later and came back, and I was like, this is the life I want to live. I felt so much freedom when I was traveling, like being able to just take a left turn or a right turn wherever I wanted. Really being present. Like, I was so present in the moment to just uh, hear myself and to self-soothe. And there were times on that trip that I didn't have service or radio or nothing, and it was just me and the dog, and she wasn't talking much. So I had to learn how to, there were scary moments. I caught my car on fire at one point. I had to figure out how to like self-soothe. And there were times that, I had holes in my tent. My tent went into a river one time and I had to fish it out and I could
Wow.
like duct taping it while it dried. Like, there were so many things that happened, and it made me realize how capable I am. Where all these years I told myself, well, I can't do it by myself, or, what if, or what happens if, someone comes and gets me. And, I was living in so much fear,
Right.
and I didn't even realize it. So this trip really opened my heart to what is all out there and what's possible and how capable we are when we allow ourselves to explore a little bit. So came back, sold my house, decided that I didn't need all that anymore, and so now I travel pretty much 80% of the time to different places, and generally it's the I don't have a specific destination. Sometimes I do. I'm like, oh, I really want to see that, or I'm kind of a national park geek, so I'll travel to different parks. Um, but it's normally the land that's calling me in a certain location, and I'll get to this certain area and it'll just like hit me. I'll feel like the vibration all throughout my body. I'm like, oh, I landed where I'm supposed to be, and I'll sit and meditate. And it's typically something with the ley lines, or there's crystals around that area that have just called me. So I'll do some like Reiki and give energy back to the earth. And then normally I'll find little crystals around. I'm like, oh, yay, crystal present.
Wow. Wow.
um,
That's really a building an incredible connection for you with nature. Like you're really tapping into that and answering the call. And it takes such a it's really what I think of when I listen to you. It's a huge leap of faith, the first thing that you did. I mean, that first move of being like, okay, it's time to let go of the corporate world that was anchoring you down, and I guess you were constantly battling with the healing you were doing, and then being back in the corporate world. It was never letting you get ahead. It was just keeping you in a maintenance, right?
right,
But that's an incredible leap of faith that it's hard to do that. It takes a lot of courage, right? And like you said, it really is about facing the fear of, the answers to all the what ifs have to be just, I'm going to be okay, whatever it is. I just
right,
have to do, the answers will come with the challenges, but if you don't start, you don't move forward, right? You don't get
right.
there. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's all like what I've learned on my journey that has helped me the most is when I'm triggered by something or something scares me, I really dive into the why behind it. Like, what am I afraid of by taking this trip? Or what am I afraid of by quitting this job? I mean, of course, there's like all the things, right? But what is it really at the root of the problem that is causing the fear? Is it the, security, the financial security? Is it um, judgment? Because for me, it like I was like, oh, I can make money anywhere. I'll figure that part out. But it was judgment for me that was keeping me there. I'm like, what will my family think if I leave this really good job for nothing? And so then I started thinking, I'm like, all right, well, what are they going to think if I continue to just balloon up and up and up and numb myself every night and not have any sort of a life anyway? So who am I
And
really living for at that point? So there's a lot of pieces that, I dive into like the why behind things. And at this point, I've learned that if something is scaring me, if there's like a fear, getting really clear on what it is and why it's there, because most of the time it's unnecessary. It's like something
yeah.
happened back in high school and now I'm still holding on to this little piece. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care if someone bullies me. Who's going to bully me
Hmm.
anymore, you know?
Right.
Um, and then choosing to take the step anyway. I kind of look at like, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? Is that actually going to prohibit me from living my life if that happens? Most of the time it's no. And so if I can figure out how to work through that worst case scenario, then anything else that could happen would be totally fine. If I can't figure out how to work through that worst case scenario, then maybe I'm not ready to take that challenge yet. But most of the time when you actually look at it, you're like, okay, worst case scenario, we pivot a little bit and switch things up and change our goal plan. So that's kind of how I handle life anymore. And then I started tuning into human design as well. And
Right. Yeah.
with human design, I'm a generator, and my authority is my sacral authority. So it's like, which is 70% of the population.
Right.
So
Can
my,
you can you just speak to a little bit of what a generator kind of entails, so that people who aren't really familiar with it might know what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a generator, so human design has all these different aspects to it. It's a lot, and it can be broken down very simply. Happy to chat with anyone about it if they're interested. But there's four different types. So a generator is one of them, and it's essentially when we are capable of reproducing our own energy. So we're kind of running around like batteries all the time. So we're not meant to go create things, but we're to be able to be in response of things. So typically these are the people that you have people coming to you all the time because you're their source of energy, and you can like refill people's pots without getting too drained. You'll get drained sometimes, but you know how to re-energize yourself. So we're kind of like the energizer bunnies of the world. But we're not out there creating things. We're just doing things, like doing all the things that need to be done. So that's generally most of the population is that. But as a sacral authority, which most generators are too, either sacral or solar. Either way, mine is sacral, which means that like my sacral center actually speaks to me. So, and it's not like English. It's just a kind of a ooh or a So when I'm making decisions anymore, I really stop and I listen. I'm like, what was my immediate, like when someone's like, hey, do you want to go see this band tonight? I'm like, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I do want to do that. Or it's like a no, I don't want to do that. And if I'm not like a full body excited about something, like 100% sure, then it's a no for me, because I've learned at this point how our energy is our most valued, resource. It's our biggest resource. So when we're just giving it away because someone's like, hey, can you come do this? And then we don't actually want to do that, then we're just, draining ourselves instead of giving in another way. But also like paying attention to why is it that you don't want to do something too, because sometimes it's a fear thing. You're like, I'm nervous because I haven't been around people for a while because I've been living out in the woods, and I don't know how it's going to be when I fit back in. And then I'm like, okay, I better go do this to make sure that I'm like being well-rounded and not prohibiting myself. But then there's times where it's like, no, I just don't want to do it. It doesn't interest me. And so I don't.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I'm also a generator and sacral authority. So it took me, before I understood the human design structure of it, I learned that the way, like, I'm a responder. So I do much better when someone comes to me and I can talk, which is why I created this format to speak with someone, because I know that I'll be much more insightful if I can respond to what you're bringing me, rather than, some podcasts or shows is just the person talking and they have so much to say, but I know myself, it's very hard for me to do that. And the yes and no's, I feel that too. And I've also learned that when there's the only way I can describe it is like there's an energetic resistance around something I'm trying to do. And there will be times when it's like, it doesn't matter what I try, it doesn't matter how I talk about it, who I speak to about it, it will ring untrue when I hear myself talk about it. And I'll just, in the back of my mind, I'm like, you can keep trying to do this, at the end this is not going to happen, right? So like I'll go through the motions because we give it the try and all that, and then it'll come to its conclusion and be like, yeah, I knew that, I always knew that. And the minute that shifts, right, and the minute I kind of open the door for something new, all the energy changes, and it's like, that's that's the non-resistant energy, that's the way forward.
Right.
So it's so wonderful how there are so many different ways that we learn and to identify, to really just hear ourselves, right, to hear our inner voice. And I think there are days I love listening to podcasts and there's always too much going on around me, but there are days where you just need the quiet just to hear yourself, right? And
Right.
just that is scary too sometimes, I find, because it's very hard to face yourself, right? And that's where
Definitely.
all the growth is, right? And like you said, learning
Exactly.
to the self-soothe and face your fears. But it can be intimidating, because then there might have to be things you might have to acknowledge about
Right.
yourself that you don't want to acknowledge, or you don't want to accept. You either have these fears or these things you might need to work on, right? That aren't, the ego comes in where it's like, what do you mean? Everything I do is fantastic. You mean I have to work more on this? No, no, no.
Right.
So there's so many different conversations, I guess, we can have with ourselves when we take that time. But it's the difference between, in your staying in the corporate, life that's physically killing you, right, slowly,
Right.
or doing something that's different but lights you up and speaks to you and makes you healthy, mind, body, and soul.
Right.
So you're really
Yeah.
a beautiful embodiment of that. It's
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, because also, I mean, you talk about the fear of what other people are going to think of you, and I think that's important to remember too. It's often something that we can't even put into words. It's just the I don't want to be like that, but it really means we don't want others to see us that way, and then or
Right.
we worry that about that's the perspective there or the judgment that they're going to put on us, the spin, when it's not even not necessarily negative either. We're just making it a negative impression.
Right, right, exactly. And when I did, like, so my parents are old school. So
Mm,
when I was like, yeah, I'm giving up this 60,000 a year job with all the cush benefits and doing
right,
great at, um, I'm giving that up to just go do my own thing. My dad was like, have you lost your mind? I'm like, yeah, kind of. Like, I actually feel like I've lost my heart, actually, trying to find it again. My mind is there somewhere.
right,
Um, but and at first it was very uh, difficult. I felt like I had to prove something to them, and then I
mm,
realized that I just need to do what feels right. So like every day I'm like, what feels right for me today? Because at first it was just like a just open book. I'm like, I don't know which way to
right.
turn. What do I even want to do with my business? And then the traveling thing happened, that trip, and that was like, okay, because that was in I took off in May of 2019. So
Mm,
I came back right before August, and that's when things started shifting. And that's when my parents were like, okay, she's clearly
mm,
wasn't meant to sit in an office every day. um,
mm,
and then, over the next year, especially like, talking about everything happening for a reason, like with the pandemic that came and, all the borders being closed, like I never would have been able to take that trip because I'm
mm,
in the US. Like I never would have been able to get to
that's
Canada
right.
and do all of that whole time if it had been, a year later that I waited on my dream. Um, so, but over time, my parents were like, wow, okay, so you lost weight because you left the corporate job and like you're healthier. We're seeing you more. You're actually smiling. You're lighting other people up, and not just that, but their classmates are constantly messaging me on Facebook asking for help and like, hey, like they're friends. So they're like, I see that you're doing something here, and
Mm,
we're sorry we gave you such a hard time at first, but clearly that was the right decision for you. And so now every time I bring up something, I'm like, hey, guess what I'm going to do? They're like, oh no. But then they're like, well, you know what you're doing, so go for
right.
it. So
They've
after a
learned to
while
have
that
faith
like,
in you.
yeah, and and other people too, they start seeing that, you know, and I'm inspiring people to do that themselves, not necessarily so drastic like mine typically tend to be. But seeing people just like decide to take their dream job, even though it's terrifying, because that a lot of us have this fear of success. It's not so much a fear of failure; it's a fear of what if I'm too good at this and I can't keep up. Like that's
Right.
a huge thing that a lot of us don't realize is actually what's holding us back from a lot of things. So there's so many little pieces to it, but once you start like choosing to believe in yourself and shift your mindset, and I always recommend to like all my clients, I'm like, go take like a mini vacation by yourself, even if it's just a day or an overnight somewhere, and see what you actually want to do. Do you want to go check out that butterfly exhibit and let your inner child come out and hang out? Like, do you want to go romance yourself at a dinner with wine and like a big, nice, pasta dish or something? Is it, a beach trip? Is it in the mountains? Like, what is it that you actually like doing? What calls you? Because so many of us don't even know what makes us happy.
No, it's
And
true.
it's a scary thing. We're all walking around and we're working these jobs and doing these things and providing for our families and doing all these things that we're supposed to be doing, but without actually realizing why we're doing it. Like
Yeah.
if what makes us happy isn't actually in line with what we're spending 80 hours a week doing, then maybe we
Why
need
are we
to
doing?
look at things a little bit differently.
I
So,
think that's why a lot of people come to a midlife crisis and why we see so many people making drastic changes at that time, because you become aware of how many years you've devoted to doing something that isn't fulfilling you or has no meaning. And you kind of come to that precipice of like, it's all or nothing. Either I'm going to sink myself in and disappear as a person, right, and allow that, or I'm going to make drastic changes. But you know, what's so unique about you is you've done it before midlife. Like you did it, you had the insight and the intuition to allow yourself, and the courage to allow yourself to do it before you got to really that point, because those years are important. These years that you're doing it now, that you've changed your life, imagine 20 years from now how different of a person you'll be, and so much healthier, that you did that earlier than later, when it's almost catch up sometimes, although it's never too late. It's never too
right.
late. I mean, that was my, like, wasn't a crisis, in it wasn't that like stereotypical midlife crisis, but it was a upheaval of my life, and turned it, completely upside down, and allowed me to sift through the debris and find myself.
Yeah.
But so, never too late to do that. But it's really quite remarkable that you did that so young. So that's amazing.
Well, and that's also part of my human design too.
Mhm.
My profile, I'm a 6'2", so like my by design, my first 30 years of life is supposed to be trial and error, and like constant trial and error until I figure something out, and I have to do it the hard way.
Mhm.
And then it's like being on the roof and like standing back and like bringing all this information to people to help them and guide them, and then later on in life I can come back down off the roof and actually be like a role model, is what it's called. But in the meantime, I'm here bringing all of these learned experiences that I've had, and how it's been coming out. It started with womb healing.
Mhm.
A lot of women have been like, I've got all these problems, and I started realizing that it's all really stemming from our womb, and it's such a powerhouse for so many of us, not just in human design, but just in general as women. Like that's our powerhouse. That's like where our little cosmic connection to the universe is in our womb. So and it holds so many things, like every emotional trauma, like it's all right there. And there's so many things that can be released when we do this womb healing. And so I started diving into that and helping a lot of women with that, just by teaching education and tuning into your womb and listening to it, and like finding pleasure again in your life, and not just on the sexual side, just in general, like all the whole thing. um, and then that started leading into shadow work, and like, okay, well, where have these program beliefs come from that we've been sitting on all these years and playing in our heads? And what are those repressed memories that haven't been coming up but they're holding you back? Like, where can we get a hold of them and pull them out by the root? um, so really diving into all those pieces of us that we stay so busy, and like a lot of times we're like mindlessly scrolling or watching Netflix or TV, to avoid the inner chatter. But
That's
with
right.
shadow work, it's like pay attention to that inner chatter. That inner chatter is there to teach you, or show you what's really going on in your world. So I do a lot of that now, and helping my clients, like, all right, well, let's take this even deeper. So it started with like Reiki and past lives I still do, but now it's like, all right, we're going to get real clear on some of the dirty work. So most of the clients that come to me have already tried, they've tried a Reiki session, or they've tried free workshops, or they've read a couple books, but they haven't figured out how to pull all those resources together. It's almost like information overwhelm. There's so much going on that they don't know which direction to take. So that's kind of where I've come in and lead and guide and figure out, like, and intuitively, like, what's the best roadmap for you to take you from where you are right now to where you're trying to go, and what are the steps and tools we can use along the way to achieve that. So
Right. Well, and you had said when we initially first started talking that teaching is the purpose of everything that you're doing. So it's not just helping them along, but helping them learn how to do that for themselves too, right? How to take it
exactly.
and use it and apply it themselves. So
Exactly. Yeah, that's it's been interesting. Even in the corporate world, teaching was my passion, because I'm a very hands-off person. Like I like
Mhm.
to be in the woods traveling and hugging on trees. Like I don't want to be on the phone all the time, you know.
Right.
So I want to have a transformational session with somebody or workshop with somebody and teach them so much that they know and are confident enough that they can take all of these things and do it themselves and help themselves. So when they are feeling like they're back down in that hole, they can pull themselves back up without having to call somebody. Because then that's also, you know, you're just adding more and more money on every time you feel like you can't do it yourself and you have to call somebody else.
Yeah.
Not that
It's
you can't do that. I mean, it's great to have resources, obviously,
absolutely.
but
But I know
but
what you
when
mean.
you
But it's also
yeah,
about the, like you said, the learning to self-soothe. It's that if you create too much of a dependency on looking to someone else for your answers or to help you through, a bad time that like you said, when you're in the dark place and you need someone to pull you out of it every time and you don't have the tools for yourself, it's kind of the halfway healing, right? Like, okay, it
right,
means you're open to hearing about it, but you still need someone to lead the way. And we're all guides for each other. And that's this whole, mentoring and coaching, whatever word you want to use for it, world where, yes, every mentor needs a mentor, I really believe. Like we all help each other,
right,
but you still need to be able to incorporate those tools for yourself. Like I've learned that myself. I mean, I went 3 years of mentoring until until I became a mentor myself. And so now we all still go through our difficult times, um, it's a better process for me to I feel the dip, and then it's like, okay, you got as low as I'm going to let you go now we're going to pull in everything that you need to use, and we're going to start the slow climb back up,
right,
and then what I find is actually, I'll not every time, but I'll still talk to my mentor, but it's usually after the fact, so it's more almost to celebrate the, like, this is what I went through, but this is how I pulled myself out of it. And because of these and these
yes,
and these things that I know, that I use these techniques or whatever, all of the different resources we have at our disposal. That's what has happened for me the last few years, where it's like, well, I did schedule the appointment, but no, I actually pulled myself out of it. So we're
right,
okay. But that's the goal that you want with your clients,
yeah,
right? Every mentor
and
wants
it's
that too, right?
empowering.
It's so empowering, it's so
Yeah,
wonderful, and as the teacher, right, it's also so rewarding to be able to see your clients do that for themselves, because we do need to have those abilities to self-soothe. Everybody needs
right,
support, but at the same time, to be entirely dependent on it is not fulfilling the purpose, right, that
right.
we have as coaches or mentors. So
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's the beautiful part of it, really seeing it actually in action. I've had so many mentors as well, like just a lot, and each one dove into different things. It's funny how I actually found my mentors was they would post something online and it would trigger me. And I'm like, why would
mm-hmm.
they say such a thing like that? And I'm like, let me look into why I'm triggered by this. And I'm like, oh, okay, turns out I need their medicine.
Yeah.
And then I'd hire them. But they're so great to have as kind of that, like, almost like a reassurance. Like, I'm doing this thing and I'm not really sure. And they're like, oh, yeah, I think what you need to do. And then, you
Mm.
do it. It's almost kind of like um, that growing reassurance, and eventually you just start feeling it in yourself, and you're like, I know what decisions to make, and just like you said, and then afterwards you're like, oh my gosh, I did it all by myself. I'm growing, woo.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so
So that's
um,
amazing. So you're able to manage all of that with your traveling, or I mean, I got you traveling for this episode today, but when you're traveling generally, are you also working with clients, or you save that for when you're back at home at your home base, or?
it kind of depends. So it depends on what kind of work is going on. If I'm just doing calls and stuff, that's like I can do that from anywhere, for the most part. And then sometimes I take trips where I'm like, I need to get out. Like
Mm.
and after the day after Christmas, just this past Christmas, I took off to Key West and I did a silent retreat for 2 weeks. I like turned my phone off. Like, well,
Wow.
I put it on airplane mode and told everyone, I'm like, don't call me. And I only used it for photos because I'm a photo freak. And like taking videos for creating meditations and stuff. Because I do a lot on the photography videography side too. But anyway, so that was a specific time where I'm like, I'm taking the time off to disconnect because I deserve that, I need that. And that's what my soul was calling for. But then there's other times where I'm like, I can pick up wherever I am as long as I have service. So I have to kind of make sure that I'm in an area that is going to have like your standard free Wi-Fi
Right.
kind of places, or in a room somewhere. Because most of the time I choose to tent or sleep in my car, because I'm all about making things super easy.
Oh yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and I like being able to just like take off and go wherever I'm. Like if I decide at 5 a.m. I want to go hit a sunrise, and I just go, and I don't have to worry about checking out of a room and packing and all that stuff.
Right.
Um, so, and then there's times that I
That's very
stay
cool.
pretty close to home. So, like right now, I just launched a 6 weeks women's container called Radiate from Within. And so it just started last Monday. So we've got 6 weeks. So right now I'm not going anywhere too crazy out of the way because if there's any tech issues or anything, I want to be able to hop on it. But so that's exciting. And I'll be offering that again after the 6 weeks.
So tell us more about what the program is.
So the program, I'm super excited. So it's all about taking yourself from, it's for women who are tired of feeling unfulfilled and uninspired with life. They're kind of stuck in their own self-sabotage patterns, stuck in their own way, and they know they're stuck in their own way. They've tried the free things, they've tried the meditation, it's probably not worked for them, or they haven't committed enough to themselves to make it work for them. So the program, it's some self-paced courses and then weekly group coaching. There's an entire meditation library in there of all my own meditations. There's 6 weeks of journaling prompts. There's a bunch of other freebies that are involved in it. I'm actually doing free human design offers in it for this first group of people. So it's an exciting container. And then there's like a Facebook accountability group where they all get to know each other and share their, what they're learning, what they're grateful for, all their, the different aspects of it. So it's to take you from feeling all of those things to radiant from within. So it goes into like the science behind energy, why it all works, and then getting really clear on what you're looking for, getting uncovering self-sabotage and habits and patterns and toxic things, emotional blockages, going into the chakra system, a bunch of shadow work, some womb healing, inner child healing, and then kind of pulling it all together. It's like, okay, well, now we've got all of this. Where can we go from here? So it's kind of like unfulfilled to inspired and full of life in 6 weeks. So
with lots of resources at their hands to walk away with too, right? To return
yes,
to.
exactly. Because like I said, my goal is that they learn how to help themselves through this. So at the end of the 6 weeks, you're like, all right, I know where I need to lead. If I have questions, I know where to go, but I have all the information I need to do this myself. So
that's amazing. So is that the first time you're running this program?
Yeah, so this is the first group.
How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, so it's been exciting. It's been a lot of fun, and there's like a huge discount this first time. So it's worth over like $2,000. I did it this time for $697. So
oh wow,
yeah, huge discount on this first round in exchange for testimonials. So next round I'll probably do maybe not quite as a discount, but still a pretty hefty discount to try and get make sure that I get all the bugs out of the system, sort of, so to speak. And then I'll be launching it fully to the whole public at the regular price.
That's amazing. And so that one will be available to find like on your website or through Facebook to find you. We'll talk about all the links and where to find you at the end, and it'll all be in the show notes. But so that'll kind of be available to the audience for next month. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it should be probably either in June or July. I know I'm traveling in June. I'm going to be gone, I'm going out west. So I'll be like major traveling all of June and some of July. So I'm, depending on how everything works technology wise, I'm either going to launch it again in June or in July, because I want to make sure that I'm fully available for everybody through the program. So kind of see how this unfolds. But I'll have all the information on my Facebook. If anyone joins my mailing list, it'll be on there as well and on my website. I don't have it on my website at the moment. I just realized that yesterday.
Okay, there's other contact points to find you about this program, Right. And you do
Yes.
so much else. Like you've done you've written a book and published yourself, Awakening Through the Past.
Yes.
And the Unchain Your Inner Warrior, that was also, are you doing that now or that was already published?
That published last year, actually this
That's
time
right.
last year. Yeah.
That was the
Um,
part of the series I also published with Maria Krause, that Unchained
yes.
Strength, right? So you've been really busy with all of that other stuff going on. You've been busy writing and publishing as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about your book, The Awakening Through the Past? And
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And I'm working on one right now too that
amazing,
I've been writing. It's still in the early stages. I've got a lot on paper so far, but that one's going to be all about shadow work and diving into your shadows and how it can completely transform your life. Using my like intimate journals from the last 2 years, like it's going to be real intimate.
wow,
I'm a little
that's
terrified
fantastic.
about it, so of course I'm excited to do it. But the Awakening Through the Past, so that was my first book I self-published, and that is all about past lives, the concept of past lives, and how they work. What's the purpose of learning about them? Like, what's the benefit of learning about them? And then it actually walks through 7 lifetimes that I had uncovered at that time, and kind of decoding them, like finding like what here's the lifetime that came through, and then here's the information that I can actually use from that lifetime to help me heal in my present. And so using that from lifetime to lifetime, and then seeing where these patterns are and how to, it really helps you guide. So when you have a reading done, you know what to do with all the information. Because it's one thing to just be like, oh, you were a king in another lifetime.
Right.
Okay, cool. Um, but if it's like you're a king in another lifetime and you were, you know, feasting on all of these things and you didn't let anybody else touch anything that was on this table, but it was full of all these goods and these like fancy foods, and you would eat a little bit and gorge yourself and then not let anybody else have any. And then maybe in this lifetime you're having issues with eating disorders.
Mm,
So there's like ways to kind of connect through. It's like, well, maybe it's because in that lifetime you were binging, so this lifetime you're it's kind of like a karmic bound of
right. Now
now
you
you're
can't
not allowing
stop.
yourself to get the nutrients, kind of thing.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of it's using the information from a past life to actually heal in your present. So, and it's a shorter book, so it's kind of it's because it's a lot of information. If you're new to past lives, it's kind of a lot to digest. So I made it a shorter, very readable, um, entertaining little book.
And when it comes to past lives, can I ask you, so the way like my what I've read this book called Journey of the Souls, and what I've kind of resonates with me is the idea that with each lifetime we really come with a lesson to learn, and with a purpose. And so um, the inheritance of like past life, either traumas or issues, behaviors that we carry on, are maybe lessons that we didn't learn, right, in the past life. Or like, I mean, like you said, also maybe behaviors that it's like kind of karmic retribution that you have to live through. So do you find that in your work with that you see those patterns, that someone comes to you and you're like, you repeatedly did not learn this one lesson, or you repeatedly kind of didn't follow through on something maybe you should have done, and that's why it keeps coming up for you in subsequent lives?
Yes, definitely. I've noticed that a lot. I've done so many readings at this point that um, there's a lot of that. And so typically with an intention for a reading, we'll do like an intention of like what past lives are currently affecting me, and
Mm,
that kind of opens the door for everything that might come through. Where sometimes they're like, I want to know why I'm stuck in cycles of rejection and fear of something specific, and then you have specific lifetimes come through
mm.
tied to that. But if you just leave it open, it sure does show you some different things that are coming through that maybe you didn't realize were affecting you. And there's
Right.
typically normally themes. There's 2 or 3 lifetimes that'll come through that share a same theme. It's like, oh, okay, so this is why you're here right now, because you started doing it here, or like maybe you had a super peaceful life in this lifetime, and then in the present lifetime it's just been utter chaos, and it's like
Mm,
trying to show you that you can have that peaceful life, or maybe that you had that peaceful life and you're not necessarily needing to have that peaceful life this time, because this time you're here for growth.
right.
So there's like different things, and seeing the same souls kind of reincarnating together again, which is really interesting too,
Oh
and the
yeah.
different ways that they connect. That's been super interesting.
Can
Um,
you pick up on that too? I mean, I believe in that too, that right, we're all part of these like clusters kind of that agree to like, okay, this time I'm going to come back as your dad, but here's going to be how I'm going to help you learn this lesson, or like this is the role I'm going to play for you in this part of your own spiritual development, and you play this. Like it's not only our own contract with ourselves, it's many contracts that we make with the same group that we come back again, and there's like the inner group that are you're continuously tied to, and then there's an outer group where people are maybe less immediate in our lives, but they come in
right,
for a short-term relationship and go, like
right,
there's so many like outward circles that ripple out.
right. And the interesting thing is that, you know, like I said, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason. So when we
Mm,
meet people, you know, they're either people that we've had there's some reason that we've met them, right? And it could be that we've had these past life connections. So this has been something that's been an interesting lesson for me. Um, just because I've had past lives with somebody, because I can almost instantly tell when I meet somebody that we've
mm,
shared souls before, shared lifetimes before. Um, just because I feel that with someone doesn't mean that they're meant to be in my life this time long term.
right.
Because that's like, you know, we get stuck on these people that, you
Mm,
know, typically we have these, you know, we end up in a relationship with someone. It's somebody that we've been with in some capacity before. Um, could be healthy, could not be healthy.
right.
But realizing that just because you have that deep soul connection, because, you know, when you have a past life connection, it feels so much more than just
Yeah.
surface level. But it doesn't mean that you
Mm,
have to stay in that relationship, because there's plenty of other ones. We've all been here long enough. There's plenty of other
yeah.
ones out there too. And maybe it's not a forever relationship kind of situation that you feel you're supposed to be in with this person. Maybe it's actually you healed what you needed to, and the reason it's kind of just kind of plateaued out is because you've already done what you needed to do, and now
Right.
you're on to your next thing.
Right. It's like
So
nice
which
to
is an
see you
interesting
again, but
right, exactly, like, and that was a hard one for me to learn. I'm like, I've got all these people, like I need to keep them close, and like, and then I was like,
mm,
oh no, because we're all on separate journeys this time.
yeah.
So just because we were close in that lifetime doesn't mean our goals line up in this lifetime. So like letting people go, and when they come back, that's like been my biggest affirmation or mantra I've been using lately. Like every day, like I say a little prayer. I'm like, whatever's for me to come for me and come to me easily, and whatever is not for me to release away.
It
And
is the way. Yeah.
the relationships and friendships and situations that have fallen away, is amazing how that happens when you just let
Right.
go of holding on to it.
And the
Um,
peace that you get from doing that, right? It's that, it doesn't have to be done with any kind of recrimination or, any negativity. I've had to do that too recently. It's more kind of like I wish you so well, I wish you the best, but I understand that I have to release this connection, and let you just go on your way. And I'm sending you off with, I'm like releasing that with like good hopes for you, and positive, all positive thoughts. I might
right,
miss you, like we can miss them, but like it doesn't mean
right,
we have to kind of keep trying to keep them close or keep the connection, and making that tough effort, that feels like you're pushing against a resistance too. Sometimes when it gets to that point, it's like, okay, it really is time to just release it. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And it's interesting. I noticed with me, like at first, it started with me saying that for specific people that
Mm,
I knew weren't good for me, and now I'm like, I just say it for everything and anybody.
yeah.
And it's so interesting when I start noticing. I'm like, I haven't heard from so and so for quite a while, and
Mm,
I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that was one of those ones that I didn't realize wasn't for me anyway and anymore, and
right.
it just kind of flowed away.
It's okay
And
to
I'm
let
like,
go.
suddenly feel so much more peaceful. um,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's interesting what happens when you really start tuning into, you know, your energy and what's right for you, and you know, forgetting about what society or the rest of people are going to think, and just really focusing on what is for you, what feels good for you, and that's really all that matters. Because if you feel good and you feel inspired and full of love and light, then you're spreading these ripples to everybody else. And that's really what it's all about. That's my purpose here, or my goal is to like help people come back into the frequency of love by letting go of all the other shit that's been holding on. And then as they're in that frequency of love, they're spreading it elsewhere. And then Mama Gaia's healing, and we're healing, and we're all healing, and the whole world will be better one day. So
100% agree. And I also just wanted to add in, and when you talk about, releasing kind of everything, what I've learned is that was something I learned with one of my mentors a few years ago, where it also allows you to tie it into what you started off by talking about. It allows you to bring back all of that empowerment and capability back to yourself of like, it's okay if these things fall away because I'm going to be okay. I can move forward positively. You know what I mean? And so it helps you release the dependence on having anybody around you in the sense, right? That
right,
you're happy to have them, but if it's positive and if it's meant to release, then you'll be just fine.
right.
Everything will be great. You don't have to feel any hurt or devastation around it. So but we're coming to the end. I'm loving talking to you. We're coming to the end of the episode. So I just wanted to first of all, thank you so much. I think you have so much to share and you have such a wonderful light energy, which is, really what you're fulfilling your purpose, because that really is what you're projecting and what you're channeling. Um, so I have a book list on a website called bookshop.org, which supports local booksellers in the United States. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a book list of recommended books from all of my guests. So I would like to ask you to share a book that you recommend to the audience that has impacted you.
Awesome. Yeah. So my biggest suggestion is Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukov. That was one of the books that I picked up after I learned about past lives, but before I dove into everything else. And just, I reread that book so many times. And there's so many pieces that really just lit my soul on fire and started helping me think about things from a different perspective and really open my eyes to a bigger picture. And I think that that's really on the healing journey, when we can take ourselves from this really micro view to like this like bigger picture of what does that really matter in the long run. That's where like our healing comes in. We're like, oh, you know what, it doesn't. So that book was super transformational for me. I would definitely recommend that book.
All right, well, it's going to go on the list. So before we go, maybe you can just tell the audience where they can find you, and all of your links will also be available in the show notes for anyone who doesn't catch it now.
Sure. So there's a couple different ways. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. My company's Journey with Your Soul. On Facebook, I have a free community for positive, like-minded people. It's called Raise Your Vibes, and it's just a bunch of free resources and tools. I share a bunch of stories of some of my travel adventures because weird things happen in there. And I have my podcast too. My podcast, I don't do interviews on mine, but I do a lot of
like talk about that. Yes.
Yeah, I do a lot of little. It's called Journey with Your Soul. I do a little bit of just sharing my stories and experiences and synchronicities of life and how to connect the dots. It's kind of whatever comes through in the moment comes through. So they're very inspired talks, but I don't do them in a very structured way because I'm learning that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes I have a lot more to say than other times. So that's available. My website's journeywithyoursoul.org. All my stuff is on there. Those are typically the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Candace. This has been a beautiful conversation. I hope we can do it again. And that's about it. I'm Talia Pardo. You can find me at phoenixrisingmentoring.com and on Facebook and Instagram. My links are in the show notes as well. And I wish everybody a good day. I wish you safe travels and have a wonderful, enlightening experience, on this trip and all your future trips. And thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.